Now, game development has advanced dramatically over the last several decades, to the point where old-school platformers, beat-em-ups, and RPGs look like they're from the Stone Age by today's standards, and so it's little wonder that people are looking at these titles and trying to remaster or remake them. But sometimes it don't go so well, you know what I'm saying? Of course you do, because you've probably played one of the 10 games that are on this list. Oh god, we have to talk about them, as I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video game remakes that butchered the original. Number 10. System Shock. Night Dive is responsible for remastering a ton of FPSs, including Turok, Doom 64, Quake, and Shadow Man. Since they helmed System Shock Enhanced Edition, a remaster of Looking Glass's revered cyber shooter was inevitable. During development, it was decided to turn the project into a remake from the ground up, and it spent so long in development hell that there were times where it felt like System Shock Remake would never actually be released. But in 2023, the long-awaited title finally saw the light of day. Although the music, controls, and graphics were refined for modern standards, other elements were clearly stuck in the past. A lack of identifiable markers may have been the norm in the 90s, but players of today expected System Shock Remake to give them some bloody idea of where to go in order to avoid wandering around aimlessly for hours on end. Weapons are dropped with such regularity that ammo rarely needed to be conserved, making the combat anticlimactically easy. Even if the ammo was scarce, the fights would still be a breeze, since the enemy's AI is, well, catatonic for the most part. The protagonist can effortlessly overpower even the biggest adversary simply by just hiding slightly behind a wall. If these issues were tightened up, System Shock Remake could have come a lot closer to matching its predecessor. But alas, it's not all we got. Number 9. Trials of Mana. Secret of Mana was a beloved SNES title, so it's a shame that its sequel, Trials of Mana, wasn't released in the Western world until 2019. The fantasy RPG was superior than that first installment in many ways, due to its improved mechanics and astoundingly diverse structure. The player's decision on which heroes to play as had a dramatic effect on the overarching narrative and which final boss they would face, offering a ton of replay value. So it seemed like a dream come true when Trials of Mana was remade in 3D in 2020. Too bad Trials of Mana fell short of expectations. Despite the PS2-worthy graphics, the frame rate splutters anytime there are more than like 3 enemies on screen. Rather than letting the heroes find the correct path on their own, they're constantly directed towards their next destination. And considering exploration was a pivotal part of the SNES counterpart, the way the remake spells out where to go undermines the gameplay. However, the weakest aspect is the voice acting. The performances are so devoid of genuine emotion, it's reminiscent of the acting in the original Resident Evil. The fact the protagonist keeps saying the same trite phrases over and over again quickly becomes tiresome. And while the battle system is more diverse this time around and the music remixes are fantastic, it's just not enough to save this remake from being a bit of a dud. Number 8. Medieval Resurrection and Medieval 2019. Now, Medieval for the PlayStation may not have been as iconic as other adventure titles at the time, but it wasn't without its charm. Due to its laugh-out-loud humor, focus on atmosphere, catchy soundtrack, and innovative puzzles, this wacky hack and slash developed a loyal fan base. Now, there's no question that Medieval wasn't without its fault, since it suffered from a janky camera, shoddy controls, and uncreative level structure, so when it was reimagined for the PSP, it was the perfect opportunity to remedy those concerns. Unfortunately, Medieval Resurrection was a total misfire. The camera was worse than ever, especially during combat, and this was coupled with the woeful hit detection, meaning that fighting even the simplest enemy proved pretty challenging. Though the voice acting was phenomenal, especially when they got Tom Baker in as the Grim Reaper, it didn't make up for all of the unfun gameplay. But with another remake in the pipeline, it seemed like the goofy swords and sorcery IP could eventually redeem itself. But somehow 2019's Medieval was the worst entry yet. Apart from a graphical overhaul, every aspect of the game seems outdated, including the lack of checkpoints and a truly unfair difficulty curve. Even though the controls, combat, and camera were a well-recognized sore point in the series, the developers did absolutely nothing to improve them. It's disappointing how Medieval has been remade twice, and yet neither version topped the original. Number 7. Tomb Raider Anniversary 1-3 Remastered. Due to Lara Croft's impact on gaming culture during the late 90s, it wasn't much of a surprise when Tomb Raider was remade in 2007. And Tomb Raider Anniversary was a solid revision due to its improved graphics, focus on exploration, and less tedious tutorials. But after the 2013 reboot trilogy revitalized the franchise, it was only a matter of time before Tomb Raider was renovated again. And sure enough, a recreation of the first 3 games was announced in 2024. But against all odds, Tomb Raider 1-3 Remastered had turned out worse than the last do-over. Hell, this trio of duds was more outdated than the initial trilogy. Although players can choose not to use the prehistoric tank controls of the previous games, the modern setup isn't much better. Due to the controls' impreciseness, the simplest platforming segments are unbearable, especially with the rampant bugs. There's an option to switch the original game's graphics, but the gameplay runs worse on these low-poly aesthetics for some reason. Although the textures and models have been drastically improved and there are some new features to play around with that are fun, this remaster feels more like a demaster. Number 6. Conker Live and Reloaded. For the longest time, Rare was renowned for making kid-friendly platformers like Donkey Kong Country and Banjo-Kazooie. For this reason, nobody expected them to fill the cutesy adventure title Conker's Bad Fur Day with singing poos, incessant swearing, and poo-obsessed beetles, Nazi teddy bears, pooing cows, and basically there was just a lot of poo. But since Conker was released at the end of the Nintendo 64's life cycle, the cheeky adventure title sold terribly, despite receiving rave reviews. So when it was announced that Conker would be remastered for the Xbox, it seemed like the foul-mouthed squirrel was finally getting a second life. But during development, it was decided that Conker Live and Reloaded would be heavily censored, with most of its expletives beeped out, and considering that mature content was Conker's primary selling point, toning it down didn't make sense. Although this decision didn't impair the gameplay, the bulk of the humour was definitely lost. Also, certain aspects tied directly to the plot couldn't be sanitized, including the buxom flower, the robot boss that could only be defeated by crushing his metallic testicles. As such, it's weird how some naughty parts were edited while others remained untouched. Strangest of all, Live and Reloaded received a mature rating. Why Microsoft remastered a mature platformer, maintained the mature rating but removed some, if not all, of mature content is truly bizarre. Number 5. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time Reshelled. During the 90s, scrolling beat-em-ups like X-Men, The Simpsons, and Golden Axe were all the rage, but for many, it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time that ruled the arcades. Playing as Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo had never felt more satisfying due to the fluid gameplay, florid combat system, and radical chiptunes. Though Turtles in Time was re-released on later consoles, it wasn't enough, because what people really wanted was a recreation of the tubular beat-em-up, dude. So when an enhanced remake was announced for the PS3 and Xbox 360, it seemed like the fanbase's prayers were answered. Even if Turtles in Time Reshelled was a pure reskin, it should be enough to keep everyone satiated, right? But somehow the modern version dropped the ball in nearly every department. Additional players couldn't join in the middle of a playthrough, unlike its predecessor. The controls were oversimplified, encouraging a button-mashing style of play. The difficulty was less balanced this time around, as enemies could unfairly cancel the Turtles' moves and overpower them with ease, and on top of all of this, there was no option to revert to the original graphics. Even though Turtles in Time is arguably the best Ninja Turtles game ever, Reshelled might be the worst. If you're looking to play a side-scrolling TMNT beat-em-up, please make sure that it's at least 2022's Shredder's Revenge. Number 4. The Silent Hill Collection. As the name suggests, the Silent Hill HD Collection was a high-definition remaster of the original games. Rather than being a straightforward revamp, the compendium included new sounds, new recorded voices, and an achievement system. It was a pretty big deal for Xbox owners, since the HD Collection marked the first time Silent Hill was available on a Microsoft system. However, it wasn't long before consumers voiced their disapproval. Firstly, the title was deeply misleading, since it only contained 2 installments, Silent Hill 2 and 3. I mean, what sort of collection doesn't include the one that started it? And even though Fog was instrumental to maintaining the nerve-shredding tension of the old games, it was erased from the HD Collection. Not only did this decision dilute the atmosphere, it made the poorly rendered graphics even more noticeable. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Since Konami didn't preserve the source code of Silent Hill 2 and 3, the developers had to work with incomplete data, which led to game-crashing bugs. The lockups, glitches, and frame rate problems were so prevalent on the Xbox 360 port, Konami was pressurized to refund disgruntled customers. Number 3. Space Invaders Invasion Day. There are few arcade titles that encapsulate the golden age of gaming quite like Space Invaders. Despite the simplistic gameplay, Taito's cosmic shooter wasn't just the best-selling game, but the most successful entertainment product in its day. Due to its universal appeal, Space Invaders was ported to every system under the sun. Running out of ways to milk their brand dry though, the devs decided to remake their most popular IP in 2002. Though Space Invaders Invasion Day, also known as Space Raiders, wasn't expected to be as revolutionary, players were curious to see what a modern Space Invaders game would be like, and the short answer was not good, my friend. Although the gameplay centers on the enemy slowly descending to the bottom of the screen as before, this travesty does not feel in any way like Space Invaders. Heck, it doesn't even take place in space. Rather than setting the battle across the galaxy, the heroes face these extraterrestrials in like an alleyway. Due to the janky animations, lack of variety in enemies, and samey levels, Invasion Day is as forgettable as it comes. With an hour-long campaign mode and 0 replay value, not even the biggest Space Invaders advocates would waste a second on this tripe. Number 2. 13. Now, devising a solid remake of Ubisoft's 13 should be relatively easy, since the 2003 cel-shaded shooter was far from perfect. Although the comic book-inspired blaster excelled in art direction, voice acting, music, and story, it was let down by its general combat, unbalanced weapons, and somewhat poor level design. In fact, it's hard to think of another game that encapsulates the phrase mixed bag better. But since 13 was teeming with potential, the bungled IP deserved another shot. So when Playmagic decided to have a crack at it 17 years after the original's release, it felt like the gaming community would get the 13 experience that they should have received the first time around. Instead, the remake took every aspect of the predecessor, good and bad, and just made it all worse. The distinctive cel shading of the original had been dialed down, giving everything a bland look. The sporadic frame rate made the simplest missions an absolute slog, and due to the abundance of glitches and audio problems, the publisher and developers were compelled to issue an apology. 2003's 13 definitely had its fair share of problems, but it was bloody flawless compared to this abomination. And number 1, Grand Theft Auto The Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. With the benefit of hindsight, it's hard to believe anyone was hyped for Grand Theft Auto The Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. Despite the fact that GTA 3, GTA Vice City, and San Andreas are considered masterpieces, it looked like the remaster would improve on them further. The Definitive Edition included new features, including destination waypoints, accessible controls more akin to GTA 5, an advanced lighting engine, fine-tuned mechanics, and overhauled graphics. However, it was the game's overall design that generated the most grievances. Rather than enhancing the graphics the old-fashioned way, AI was used to upscale textures, cursing every character with disproportionate body parts, rubbery animations, and alien-like facial expressions. And somehow the game plays worse than it looks, especially the PC version, which was unplayable for the first 3 days. Due to the abundance of glitches, it wasn't long before refunds were demanded. And just to rub salt in the wounds, Rockstar delisted the original titles from digital stores, so this pitiful trilogy was the only way to experience the stories of the original GTAs. Understandably, this foolish decision inspired the angry mob to review bomb this train wreck into oblivion. Despite the fact the decision was reversed, it was too little, too late. If the developers patched GTA the trilogy to perfection, which they didn't, it still wouldn't undo the damage it caused. Cheers. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 video game remakes and remasters that butchered the original. I hope that you enjoyed that, and let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Instagram and AX, where it's at RetroJ, but the O is a 0, and I hope to see you over there, my friends. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. I hope you're treating yourself well, because you deserve the bloody best, alright, you massive ledge, and I hope you're smashing it today. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.